Welcome, Greek U Nation. It's episode number 551 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mike Ayalon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and an author. Our sixth book just came out. It's called I'm So Beautiful, It's Ridiculous: Unleashing and Promoting Strength, Self-Worth, and Real Sisterhood. So go and pick up that book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble today. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring college students together. Fun fact, whenever I'm speaking on college campuses, I like to talk to the students about how much sleep they are getting at night, how they're balancing work, student organizations, and their class assignments, and I even learn about their eating habits as well. Burnout is a real issue today on college campuses, so talking about it openly and proactively can help the students realize that self-compassion is very important. Let's talk a little bit more about it on today's show. Balancing work, leadership, and family can feel overwhelming, leading to burnout and turnover. Emotional intelligence helps you lead effectively at work and at home. As the founder of HT Compassion, Hiba Tanvir specializes in emotional intelligence solutions that do a whole bunch of things. Number one, enhance leadership and productivity. EI-driven teams are 25% more productive. They improve work-life balance. EI reduces burnout and improves overall well-being by 67%. And finally, it strengthens communication at home. EI reduces family stress by 40%. So Hiba offers tailored talks, consulting services, and hands-on workshops in achieving workplace success. Her approach helps leaders foster emotional intelligence and create a positive emotional environment, reducing turnover and driving long-term retention. By equipping leaders with the tools to manage emotions effectively, she empowers teams to thrive both personally and professionally. Welcome to the show, Hiba.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction, Mike.
Hey, it is my pleasure. If you want me to travel with you around the country and do that introduction on stages all over the United States, I'm happy to do it. Just packing in the suitcase and I'm ready to go.
Sounds like a deal. Sounds like a great offer.
Okay. So you decided on the University of Texas at Dallas for your undergraduate experience. Tell our audience, why did you decide that UT Dallas was the right choice for you?
So my sister had just moved to Dallas. She had gone to UT Austin and she had just recently gotten married and moved to Dallas. And so when it was time for me to start, it was like, okay, where, should I go? I had done my high school and I did my schooling in Saudi Arabia. And so when my parents decided to send me, they wanted to make sure we got a good, solid education. It was like, let's make sure you're somewhere where there's already family. And that's why it was like, well, it was going to be Dallas. And then University of Texas at Dallas had a really good business program. And so it was like, okay, this makes the most sense. I can stay at home and I can get the whole college experience as well.
Makes total sense to me. And Dallas is really a beautiful city. Believe it or not, I actually met my wife in Dallas, Texas, and just an incredible place. Very, very special place for us. So I enjoy going back quite often. You also, interesting thing about you is you were the assistant director of admissions at DeVry University for almost 5 years. If you had to give advice to the college students who are listening right now that are applying for grad school, they're applying for med school, law school, a bunch of them want to be lawyers, how can they make their application stand out?
Great question. And I've helped a lot of students from different fields kind of write their, help them with their personal statements and kind of coach them through the process. I think what you have to really embrace is your vulnerability and your true personal story. I think we're often trying to write these great sentences, and now we've got ChatGPT to polish it all up. And it's like, yeah, you just sound too perfect to be real. And I think it's so important to embrace who you are, the flaws, the journey, the imperfections, the failures. And that's really what makes for like a stellar impression, because it's like, this is the real you. They're looking for some real person in there. So I would say go ahead, kind of flaunt your vulnerabilities, if you may.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, it's the same thing for speakers. You got to be a really good storyteller. And how do you be a good storyteller? It's just by being vulnerable. That's where the audience is going to hook into your story and they're going to figure out how their experiences relate to your experiences. And they're going to be like, oh, yeah, I felt that way once. It might not be exactly the way that you felt it, but certainly they're going to empathize with you. And that's what draws you in. So I think the same thing is true for that application. Just be vulnerable. That's really what hooks people in. in. And I think that's great advice. It's fantastic. Really, really good stuff. So, as the founder of HT Compassion, you specialize in speaking about emotional intelligence. Tell our audience, what is EI and why is that important for college students?
So I'm glad you asked. Emotional intelligence is basically, it's all about understanding your own emotions. It's about knowing how to create synergy with the emotions of those around you to create good, healthy communication and connection. And basically, emotional intelligence is made up of four components. It's got self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship building. And if you think about it, those are essential life skills that you need in any sphere of life, whether you're going, you're an undergrad, whether you're a grad student, whether you're a teenager, whether you're a parent, whatever stage of life you're in. I joke and I say, whether you're 3 or 93, you are going to need those skills simply because we all have emotions, Mike, right? I hear people say, oh, well, I'm not really into that stuff. Well, it's like saying, well, I'm not really into air. Well, that's great. You don't have to be into air, but you're going to breathe it. You need it. And so the sooner we learn how to use our emotions to our advantage, the sooner we learn how to leverage them, how to tap into their intelligence, the sooner all realms of our life will improve, whether it's our stress levels, our burnout, our relationships, our productivity. It's just such a key element, especially in today's world, Mike, where obviously stress, burnout are real. It's getting, even before it was kind of reserved for, oh, when you get to college or when you start working. But now, unfortunately, we see kids having anxiety and stress, right? And that means that we definitely have to take a more proactive approach in how we're looking at this, not wait for people to make unfortunate headlines, not wait till it's too late, but really start introducing these practices early on. And the way I view it is, and my conviction is, that emotional intelligence is a proactive approach towards the global mental health crises.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that this weekend, actually. One of the things that I did was I watched that Netflix show, Adolescence. I don't know if you had a chance to check that out,
No,
but
I need to.
yeah, you need to go and check that out because I think you hit the nail right on the head because it is happening younger and younger. And I do think that a lot of it has to do with social media too. I mean, I think it plays a role in the stress and the anxiety that these students are feeling. And that show, Adolescence on Netflix, I mean, it's about a 13-year-old. And I think the impact that social media has had on him, and young men all over the country, and certainly for women as well. So yeah, I think it's something that we need to talk more about.
And
Um,
Mike, I think
yeah.
it's important to note here that, all of us are spending more times on our devices. We are being bombarded with social media messages of all sorts. And in such times, it becomes so much more crucial to have those buffering agents. And those buffering agents are having those solid relationships, having that sense of community that, Greek life provides, having those friendships, having that relationship with our family. And unfortunately, two things are happening at the same time, which is why it's a perfect recipe for a storm, which is you've got social media out of control. And then you're seeing our relationships, our personal relationships also kind of, falling apart, not being able to handle conflict, everyone wanting to just keep everything comfortable, never really have those deeper connections because it requires us to be vulnerable. Now, I imagine those two things happening together means there's going to be a lot of isolation, a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, a lot of loneliness. And, unfortunate things happen when those things, manifest.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about those student organizations. You brought up Greek life. Many of our listeners are in fraternities and sororities. How would you make a student organization on a college campus an emotionally intelligent organization?
So leading by example. So those student leaders need to model that. It's great. It's like in any setup, whether it's at home or work or college, we can't expect others to do things if we are not embodying and modeling it. So focusing on developing emotional intelligent practices. So becoming more self-aware. It all starts with being more self-aware, recognizing your own triggers. So as a student leader, asking yourself, like what situations get me triggered, what get me worked up. I love doing this activity in my workshops, which is what fills your cup, what drains your cup. And oftentimes we don't know that. Something that could be a great thing that fills your cup, Mike, could be something that totally drains my cup. Like maybe listening to music helps you relax. To me, it gets me more worked up, right? But if I don't know that, I might be doing things without realizing that are triggering you. So instead of building a relationship with someone, you're actually doing things that are constantly kind of eroding it. So self-awareness is key. Doing activities as student leaders that create that culture where people can be vulnerable, right? Swap and experience night, for example. Being able to talk about a difficult moment, a time that you battled with maybe something challenging. By creating avenues and spaces to do that, we normalize it, first of all. It's no longer like, oh my God, this has got to be a secret. You're coming out there and you're doing it, and it creates a really strong sense of belonging. And then also kind of making this language part of your lingo, right? So starting meetings with, how are you feeling today? So those are small things, but language has such a powerful effect in changing the culture. We want to do these big things, but it starts with the conversations we have.
I love that. That's really good stuff. I looked at your logo there. You have the big H, the big T, and then there's compassion kind of, flowing through the middle. So, as a leader of a fraternity or sorority, somebody who's listening right now, why do you believe that compassion is so important to their success in leading that organization?
So, Mike, when I decided to name my firm HT Compassion, a lot of people are like, well, why compassion? Because compassion is the heart of emotional intelligence. The goal of emotional intelligence is to make us more compassionate. And why? Because there's a difference between empathy and compassion. A lot of times we think they're synonymous, but they're not. Empathy is me being able to feel what you're feeling, right? You tell me, oh, Hiba, I had a really rough weekend. It was really hard for me. And this happened. I'm like, oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. Yeah, I can understand, and my weekend wasn't that great either. I'm empathizing with you, which is great. It's one of the tools for compassion, but compassion is actually goes a lot deeper. Compassion is about taking positive, supportive action to alleviate someone's pain or suffering. So it requires us to do more than just lip service. And at the end of the day, when we can practice self-compassion, you have to be compassionate to yourself first. You can start being a source of compassion for other people. And if we have relationships that are founded on compassion, it changes the game. There is more synergy, there is more teamwork, there is more kindness, there's just a healthier dynamic. And so to me, I feel without compassion, any conversation on creating resilience, on creating any meaningful change is really just empty words.
I like that. That's really good. I think about Maslow's hierarchy and all of the needs that people have. And
Uh-huh.
so the leaders in these organizations, if they want to get maximum production out of their organization, they do have to have compassion. They have to be sensitive to the fact that student needs are real, whether that be sleep or food or safety. Like all of these things are incredibly important to get people to the top of Maslow's hierarchy where they're actually achieving everything that they need to achieve in life, right?
Totally. And I think it's so important to recognize that we can't get to the top without working through the things that are needed along the way. And one of the things I talk a lot about is the upstairs brain and downstairs brain. And essentially what we're trying to do, in college is, we're trying to get everything done. We want the good grades. We want to be popular. We want to lead, organizations. We want to be a part of so many things. But the challenge is that all of that is great stuff that's part of the upstairs brain, right? Self-actualization and being able to work on these things. But none of that can happen if we don't go through the downstairs brain, which is where we need to be regulated, where good sleep habits, good diet, good relationships, all of that is needed to kind of make sure that our downstairs brain is regulated, because only then can we really do stuff that involves the upstairs brain, the prefrontal cortex and stuff.
That's a good way to think about it. Perfect. So let's talk a little bit more about communication because a lot of the college students that I think about, they have a lot of clutter in their communication styles. That could be things like assumptions about other people. It could be misunderstandings between two people in an organization, or like you talked about earlier, those emotional triggers that something just sets you off. So how can you identify and remove that clutter?
So I'm glad that you used that word clutter, because I've come up with this whole thing, which is called decluttering communication. And it's this really fun workshop where I give people a bunch of clutter and I'm going to say, sort it. And they kind of look at you like, but it's interesting to see how people get around to doing it, how they sort. And I draw that analogy to the clutter that we have in relationships, because when there's clutter, as you said, we're not able to really see beyond the surface. And clutter, in addition to all the things you mentioned, is also our own baggage. So if we had a tough childhood or we had, whatever challenges we had, that also is clutter. So sometimes it makes us extremely sensitized to little things. We're picking up on things. Oh my God, I think he doesn't like me. I think she said this. I think she's out to get me. And that creates unnecessary clutter, but we're not aware that it's coming from our own thoughts, right? We're always thinking it's the other person. Emotional intelligence talks a lot about being able to work through that. First of all, by developing your own self-awareness. So I, for example, know that sometimes I tend to be a little bit, I'm sensitive and I'm perceptive, but sometimes I'm picking up on things that might not be there. And then what happens when I'm doing that? I'm forming assumptions. Oh, she didn't agree to that, maybe because she thinks XYZ, maybe she doesn't or he doesn't, and I'm going into this spiral now, which is not founded in anything really concrete. So when I become self-aware, I'm like, hey, Hiba, you have the tendency to do that. You're going there. So I now have self-awareness. I need to now self-manage. So what do I do when I'm in this mode? Pause, take a deep breath and say, there is no such thing. You're going to move on with a more positive assumption, right? I've self-managed. Then social awareness means when I'm engaging with that person, I don't let those judgments, those preconceived notions get in the way, right? So I'm maybe acting from a place of more empathy, more compassion, more understanding. And then eventually relationship building. When I do that, I can collaborate better. I can build a stronger team. I can be a source of inspiration to someone. And so if you're a part of an organization or if you're leading a student organization, the key is you're going to be working with so many people. There's bound to be conflict, and conflict can be really healthy. The challenge is most of us don't know how to have healthy conflict. Conflict means fight. It means mean words. It means being, saying things that we shouldn't. It means animosity, but it really shouldn't. And that's also what emotional intelligence really talks and coaches us on, is how to have a healthy exchange of ideas where we all can disagree, but we're disagreeing because we are coming from a different point of view with a curiosity to also learn from you. And it's like a back and forth. And I think that is such an essential skill that is often really missing, I feel, in today's youth, is we don't know how to have conflict, so we avoid it altogether. Anything that's uncomfortable, ghost that person, don't reply, disappear, right? And that's just not, you can't have deep connections with that attitude.
Yeah, well, we certainly saw that in social media. When I think about the elections here in the United States, it's like I just have to remove everybody that I disagree with, not see it, and then somehow that's going to go away. It doesn't go away. Like we have to learn how to work with each other, right? So yeah, I think about that all the time. I also think about my son. He's a sophomore in college now, and he was just talking this weekend about just how stressed out he is. And I'm thinking about the burnout and all of that we talked about. I mean, there's a big toll being placed on these college students. There's the high cost of higher education. It's a lot of money right now. And just all the rigorous demands that are being placed on them in terms of you have to get straight A's in order to get the best job. And so he feels that pressure of like performing at a very, very high level. And he wants to maintain this 4.0 GPA that, he worked very hard for. And he wants to continue that all the way through senior year. But I can see the stress. I can see the burnout. So how can they get better? What practical advice do you have for them to get better at reducing this burnout and just cultivating self-compassion?
So I think it's important that we stop constantly focusing so much on the end product, but we also focus on the journey. So growth, right? We don't have to get a 4.0. But hey, if your grades are improving, you're putting in consistent work and you're showing improvement, let's celebrate that. Those are the wins we have to celebrate. The effort that was put in, the focus, the dedication, the growth mindset that you had. We need to also, as support, whether in the form of parents or colleagues or friends or student leaders, need to recognize that everything is not going to culminate into a perfect A or into a stellar project but the effort has to be recognized because that really is the only controllable in our hand. The other thing I love talking about and saying is we need to stop wearing stress and burnout as a badge of honor.
Yeah.
It's not. I remember when I was in college, I pulled an all-nighter, right, to write a paper. And that's not usually the way I work. I'm usually very like structured. I like to get things done. And I remember doing it, and I distinctly remember this, and it was like over 20 years ago. And I remember being so excited to go and tell everyone the next day that, oh, I was up till like 5 a.m. working on my paper because it felt like this is a very cool thing. I'm like, this is part of the college experience is being sleepless and being, over caffeinated and just trying to get through. And that's exactly where we get it wrong, right? It doesn't need to be that way. That's where having better time management strategies when you're self-aware, you also know how you work best. So do I have a tendency to leave things till the very end and then work in a panic mode? Okay, I know that, and I know a deadline is coming up. I need to start planning better. I need to stop waiting till the end. Those little things change the way we operate, right? Where it doesn't have to be this quick kind of, I got to get this done now when I'm over. Because also what happens when you do that is you're working from your downstairs brain. You're reactive. You're not making the best decisions. You're going to make silly mistakes. You're not going to enjoy the experience either, right? Because you're just trying to get it done at this point. So I think it's so important to cultivate this tradition where we appreciate the small wins. We don't almost celebrate this burnout. Oh my God, I only slept 2 hours. Oh my God, I'm so okay. But a more concerned question should be, okay, what can I do to support you so you can get more sleep? What would help you have, a better balance? Those are the things that student leaders should kind of be talking about so that it changes that rhetoric from burnout being cool to burnout being a sign of concern. Like, what can we do to help you?
Yeah, but I think that's your program title right there. It's, pulling an all-nighter is not a badge of honor. That's the title. I mean, really, because that's what it's all about these days. And I'm like, you shouldn't be proud of that. That's not a good thing for anybody.
And trust
So,
me, I mean, I know it because I was doing it thinking it's 3, it's 4, it's 5, I'm still working. And tomorrow I'm going to go announce this to everybody. And who cares? It was your sleep. You lost it.
right. Yeah, who cares? You're the only loser here.
You're the
And
only
then
loser in this mix.
right. And then the question is, how good is that paper really that you're typing up at 5 in the morning? I think that's another thing to talk about. The other thing that was really interesting about you, I was really, really fascinated by this. You developed the Man Up program that was specifically designed to teach emotional intelligence to youth in Nigeria. How did you develop this Man Up program, and why is working with youth in Nigeria something that you wanted to tackle?
So, Mike, I have been always very passionate about championing women's causes, and I've done a lot for that. I've hosted radio shows for it. I do a lot of writing for it. I helped, struggling women start a home-based catering business here in Dallas called the Hope Kitchen. And I've got two sons of my own. I've got a 13-year-old and a 7-year-old. And I kind of realized that I wanted to do something for men because I recognize that the struggles are real. Women somewhat tend to be more naturally a little bit more attuned to their feelings, but men are not. And if we understand that, these men are going to become leaders, fathers, brothers, whoever, we need to do more to support them. And often I found that the tools are not there and there's not enough focus on what is it that we can do to help them recognize their emotions and embrace their vulnerability. And so I always have a knack for wanting to go after, communities or people that are forgotten, that are like, someone's going to get to them. And that's where I collaborated with this academy in Nigeria. And, they kind of love the work that I do. And I said, I want to focus on men. I feel like I've done a lot for women, but I really do think it's important that, and being a mom of two boys, I see the struggle and I see also what happens when men are not taught how to regulate their emotions, how much, unfortunate trauma, stress, generational trauma it creates. And so the Man Up program was really that. It was this idea of doing working with the youth and developing a program teaching them how to embrace their anger, how to get comfortable with emotions, what they can do to self-regulate, developing more meaningful connections. And it was just so exciting because, I mean, this was done virtually. And, Mike, the number of men I mean, this was for 13 to like 20, it was about 21, but I had people in it that were like 24, newlyweds, and men reaching out saying, I really struggle with XYZ. I don't know, but I just can't get myself to express how I feel. I just tend to become really numb. Numbness and this idea of, well, I don't care, which is the shell that unfortunately a lot of guys go under. And it's this mask of indifference almost to show, well, I'm man enough and I don't feel anything. It's unfortunate, but under that is where so much sadness, so much grief, so much anger, so much unprocessed pain resides. And what a waste, because I feel emotions are so beautiful. They have the power to create, to build, to do anything. I always say the core of anything in this world is emotion, the best of things and the worst of things. Wars start because of emotions. Great partnerships, synergies happen because of emotions. And so I think it's so important to tap into the intelligence of these emotions to really create a world where we don't see so much isolation, burnout, stress, and loneliness.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you created that program because I do think that young men are really, really struggling right now. And there's just this void of information out there, and it gets filled, with all of this, masculinity talk from people that really shouldn't be talking about it. And that's what they hear. That's what they populate on social media, and that's what consumes them. So not that I work for Netflix or anything. I don't. I have no affinity to Netflix, but absolutely you're going to love that show, Adolescence, because you have a 13-year-old son and because of the work that you're doing with the Man Up program. I think it's going to be really fascinating for you to watch that.
It is on my to-do list to watch
Yeah,
this weekend.
you got to go check that out. I think it's going to be very meaningful for you and just some eye-opening moments that you're going to be like, wow, okay, all
Wow.
right, this is why the Man Up program is so important. So anyway, but wonderful. This has been really, really good. And the one thing that gets me going is really good food. Okay, I like to eat, and so the next time I end up in Dallas, which I think is going to be pretty soon, as a matter of fact, where should I be going for a great meal?
So in downtown, there is this phenomenal ribs place called Risky's.
Uh-huh.
That is a great place to go. Great food. You walk around, they've got art galleries, they've got fountains. It's just a nice downtown experience. So I would definitely recommend that.
Wow, that sounds good. You got the ambiance and you got the ribs. All right, that sounds good to me. I'm ready to go. Go check that out. I love it. All right, so if our listeners want to learn more about you and all of your various speaking services on emotional intelligence and reducing burnout, where should they go in order to connect with you?
So go ahead and check out my website, which is HT, which are my initials, htcompassion.com. I'm also on Insta with HT_compassion. So go ahead and hit me up. You can email me at htcompassion@gmail.com, and I would love to come and speak with you, talk to you about this. This is something that I'm so passionate about. It's just truly something that comes from the heart. And I feel like, when we think about what is our purpose, I feel to me having this gift, when I was 13, rather than reading fashion magazines and romantic novels, I was reading books like Conquest of Mind and, Seven Habits of Highly Effective Teenagers. So I feel like I've just been always fascinated by it. I know a lot and I would love to share that with you. So I definitely hope that, I'm able to come and speak and connect with our audience.
That's fantastic. All right, go check out the website. It's htcompassion.com. Hiba, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you for spending so much time with our listeners today. We really appreciate it.
Same here, Mike. You just make the conversation so smooth and so easy. So I really appreciate that. And I hope to see you in Dallas soon.
That sounds good to me. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation, I want you to like it and I want you to share it with other college students. That is super, super important. Thanks for joining us today. We'll see you on the next episode of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. Bye for now.